You know, every time I think I'm close to finishing a video about Warlords of Draenor, the situation changes. I know it's overdue, but I'd like to do a video about Warlords now. And the fact that the situation keeps changing actually tends to be a bad thing, unfortunately. And the things that change aren't the only bad things in the game either. I think I'll start by talking about two things that made me nervous going into Warlords from Mists. First, the fact that Blizzard put all its PvE eggs into garrisons, and second, the fact that Valor and Justice were going away at the end of Mists. Of course, the Apexis crystals pretty much replaced Valor and Justice in that you can buy gear and gear upgrades using Apexis crystals. But instead of getting those crystals from fun pastimes like dungeons and raids, you get them from dailies. I've recorded this idea before for a Warlords reaction video, but I can't reuse this old audio. Do you know why? Because at the time I recorded the first video, there was only one daily that got you those Apexis crystals. That one daily tended to feel like a timeless isle all over again. It was big, wide open space, most of the things you could do there would progress your objective, and there were little secrets to find that could help progress faster or further. And in that original audio I praised the fact that Blizzard was learning from its mistakes in Mists. Like that dailies were repetitive and got boring fast, so they cut the dailies out, and it was especially good that they were avoiding making dailies that were required for progression content. That audio got recorded before patch 6.2 though. In patch 6.2 they added, you guessed it, more dailies. Dailies that, while they could have a lot of flexibility, nevertheless got old fast. And get this, the factions those dailies get you reputation for are necessary to max out your garrison's new shipyard. So let's recap. In Mists of Pandaria, there were dailies that, while varied, got boring and repetitive fast, and that were pretty much required for the optimal raiding progression. In patch 6.2, there are dailies that, while varied, get boring and repetitive fast, and that are pretty much required for optimal garrison shipyard progression. That's not as bad as Mists, but going from 6.1 to 6.2, it seems like Blizzard has unlearned the hard lessons it learned coming out of Mists. The fact that they're unlearning those lessons is kind of scary to me. And then there's garrisons. Don't get me wrong, at first building my garrison was fun, but once it's been built, what more is there to do with it? Now, I can tell that from the way garrisons were laid out and from the fact that there are a lot of missions that take 8 hours, Blizzard wanted garrisons to be the thing that keeps players logging in every day. Those missions are kinds of things that say, loud and clear, go ahead and go to bed. When you wake up, log back in and reap the rewards of choosing me. In Mists, there were so many things Blizzard tried to do in order to keep players logging in. Dailies, the Half Hill Farm, the Blingtron 4000. It's like finding ways to keep players logging in was the whole point of Mists, and that was something Cataclysm didn't offer. But the problem is, turning World of Warcraft into Farmville isn't really an effective way to keep players logging in. The 3 million subscriber loss before 6.2 tells us as much. Now, garrisons and the profession buildings that come with garrisons did offer ways of getting gear that didn't require having a profession or raiding, but there's a problem. Garrisons generally don't help bring players together. The difficult content in Vanilla, the Burning Crusade, and to a lesser extent Wrath of the Lich King did bring players together. You couldn't get far raiding without a guild. In Warlords, you can do things on your own, and that lowers the appeal of WoW being a mass multiplayer game. Blizzard really should do more to make it appealing to team up with other players and can do so consistently, because honestly, I think other players should be the real reason you keep logging into the game. Content in and of itself can't be expected to keep players logging in to see it again and again. Those players should be logging in to see each other again and again. As far as the content of Warlords goes, besides the fact that it made the game into a borderline single-player game, the content was actually pretty good. Apart from making the narrative of Warlords too short by only having 2 patches after release, the story was great. There were excellent character developments for Yrel. I thought the Shadow Moon Valley quest chain was very well done, with real edge-of-your-seat moments that brought the player into the unfolding events very successfully. The questing to have the player explore and establish frontline bases in other zones in Draenor was also well done. I can't complain about Khadgar's quests either. They did a good job of getting the player into other content. But there were a few ways Blizzard dropped the ball with the story. Some of this is opinionated, but hey, on YouTube, what isn't opinionated? First of all, there's Ner'zhul. This is the guy that eventually became the Lich King. He was the antagonist who drove about 60% of the plot in the Warcraft 3 real-time strategy game, and who was the main antagonist of World of Warcraft's most successful expansion pack. This guy should have been the final boss of a raid, or at least a major boss in one of the raids. Instead, Blizzard made him the final boss of a 5-man dungeon? Really, Blizzard? Secondly, the story threads from Mist didn't wind through Warlords the way they should have. Rathian was just about the biggest player in Mist's narrative, but he didn't even make an appearance in Warlords, just a mention as having been at Admiral Taylor's garrison and then nothing. Not a blurb about what he did there or what his plans were. Honestly, he should have made several cameos throughout the expansion that thickened the plot each time you saw him, but we barely get one mention, and then the writers seemingly forget all about him. And considering how big a role Garrosh had in driving Mist's plot, he should have at least been a raid boss in early Warlords of Draenor, but instead he was a quest boss. And the player didn't even get to finish him off. Thrall did. With magic. And Garrosh, of all things, blamed Thrall for who he was. First off, Garrosh is a sociopathic jerk who shouldn't even think there's anything wrong with himself to blame Thrall for in the first place. This goes totally against what his character was built up to be in the novels and in Mists. The dying conversation between him and Thrall should have been him taunting Thrall that Thrall's compassion and honor would make him weak on the inside no matter how strong his magic makes him on the outside, and that his compassion will destroy him in the end. Not, I implicitly admit there's something wrong with me because I blame you for who I am. And secondly, the sheer fact that his death happened so early in the expansion pretty much cuts off any feeling of connection between Mist's story and Warlord's stories. And the story was the silver lining in Mists. They should have at least clung to that silver lining in Warlords. But no, they were clearing out the characters they established with all haste, which brings me to my third point. They worked hard in the Tanaan Jungle starter quest chains to establish that there were 5 generals of the Iron Horde, and that they were badasses who you don't mess with lightly. And yet, how fast did they all go down? Before patch 6.0 was done, Ner'zhul went down in a 5-man dungeon. I've already covered what I think of that. And Kargath Bladefist was the first boss of the Ogre raid High Maul. Funny. He could have made a good boss for an Apexis-based raid in Spires of Iraq. Blizzard established that there was an ancient Apexis civilization on Draenor, but they never really fleshed that out, and they could have gotten a lot out of that aspect of the lore, which brings me to my fourth point. All the things that Blizzard didn't do in Warlords. There's the fact that Karabor wasn't the Alliance capital in Draenor, for instance. The final quest chain in Shadowmoon Valley for the Alliance was a push from your garrison to free Karabor from an Iron Horde attack. The Draenei living there were at the end of their rope, and you and your forces pull a big damn heroes moment and buy time for one of the Naaru to show up and show just how badass a Naaru can be when the chips are down. It would have been awesome if that act had given the player an awesome reward, like unlocking access to a big, functional, beautiful capital city. If the art in Karabor was half as good as Exodar, it would have been a terrific reward for a job well done. But no, what we get is a cheapo island with buildings haphazardly huddled along the muddy roads. It looks like the entrance to a battleground or something. And that's just scratching the surface for the Alliance side. The Horde got the same raw deal, and even if they hadn't, there's Farallon Fields. If you look at the map of Outland, you'll see that Gorgrond is about where Netherstorm would be, but in the Burning Crusade, NPCs kept saying that Netherstorm used to be Farallon Fields. There's a whole implemented zone that Blizzard threw away. And there are a few other things I can think of that I don't like, but that are minor. I've done 3 or 4 videos already about how Holy Paladins have no AoE attack, and Blizzard hasn't exactly fixed that, though the need isn't as strong now since I have Garrison abilities backing me up. Actually, that's one of the strong points of Garrisons, but I digress. There's also the fact that Holy Infusion enchant illusion was basically dropped. It was one of the best enchant graphics out there for a healer as of the Burning Crusade, and I actually tore down my storehouse and built an enchanter's study just to get Holy Infusion. Lo and behold, Blizzard never implements it. Professions are another thing I'm highly into, and at first I had mixed but mostly good feelings about what I was seeing in Warlords. I was sad to see hand tinkers gone from the game. They were pretty fun while they lasted. And I was also sad to see a variety in bombs disappear and to see the great customization of cogwheels taken out too. I was also sad that Blizzard made no effort to make Goblin and Gnomish engineering different from each other. But I was glad to see upgradable goggles make a comeback, and they even allowed other professions to experience the joys of upgrades. And, lo and behold, elemental items and other things besides just ore when you mine made a comeback too. Having a single daily cooldown item that you make directly from ore, skipping the smelt into bar step, felt weird. But it made the profession progression seem less grindy and more gated, and while getting goggles early on in the progression helped me level up by getting good gear early, it took away some of the reward of maxing out your profession. All in all, at the start of the expansion, it was clear that Blizzard had put a lot of thought into professions and trying to revamp them and make them more interesting and fun. And then 6.2 rolled around. It was clear that Blizzard wasn't putting much thought at all into it. Sorcerous Air was one of the things engineerings could get and use for their crafting up until 6.2, but as soon as 6.2 came out, every recipe that used Sorcerous Air was gone. Those things are just about useless now. I'd ask what Blizzard was thinking, but it's clear that they weren't thinking. I was hoping at the end of Mists that Blizzard would do things right the first time so that they wouldn't have to spend their energy putting out fires and fixing problems, so that they could instead spend that energy making new, fun content. But that didn't happen. Blizzard's got no computing power left in its brain to realize maybe making a crafting item useless is a bad idea. If I was doing this video at the start of Warlords, you'd be itching to hear my opinions on the healing changes they made at the start of Warlords. Actually, I like them. One complaint you aren't getting out of me is that I don't like class design in Warlords. Don't get me wrong, class balance will never be perfect. But I enjoyed being a Holy Paladin in Warlords more than I did in Mists. Even though there's no damage for mana mechanic in Warlords like I'd hoped, it feels like there is one since my main damage spell doesn't cost mana and mana over time is pretty high in Warlords. Now, the reason that I'm making this video now is because of the announcement that 6.2 is going to be the last content patch. Talk about ending on a bum note. Now, don't get me wrong, High Maul, Blackrock Foundry, and Hellfire Citadel have all been very good raids, but the rest of the expansion, garrisons, the single-player factor, the repetitive quests, all those cancelled out that awesomeness. And having played since vanilla, I was expecting this expansion to be a big one. I mean, we got 10 experience levels instead of the 5 Mists and Cataclysm offered, and there was a whole new continent, and there was a lot of hype and backstory about the characters involved. Since I was expecting something big, I was expecting 3 or 4 content patches and probably 5 raids total by the end of the expansion. That's what other expansions gave us, but instead we get 2 patches and 3 raids total. You know, if Blizzard is planning to give us less content per expansion, they really ought to lower the price per expansion. For that matter, for everything else we got in this expansion, they should have charged us less. All in all, while this expansion had a bright start, it went downhill fast. If Blizzard wants to turn World of Warcraft around, they're going to need to rethink their strategy for how to keep players logging into the game every day. And maybe that's the silver lining to the fact that the expansion is pretty much over at this point. With a new expansion, they'll get a new start. They'll get a chance to revamp the game in new and hopefully exciting ways, maybe ways that draw the players together day after day and week after week. Here's hoping Blizzard finds a way to make the game interesting and keep it interesting in the next expansion. Whatever that will be.